Okay, so this is module 28, the money market. This is the first of the two real important graphs from Unit 4. We'll be talking a lot about this graph. The two graphs from this unit are basic supply and demand graphs. This one is the supply and demand of money, excuse me, and the loanable funds is the supply and the demand of loanable funds. So they work exactly the same way. So demand for money. So the opportunity cost of holding money. When you hold on to cash, you're foregoing something else. And what you could be doing with that cash is investing it. And so when the short-term interest rate is high, your opportunity cost of holding cash is also high. And then if the short-term interest rate is low, the opportunity cost is low. You're not losing out on anything by holding on to your money because you're not going to make a lot of interest when you put it into the bank, okay? And so this is an important idea, and it should help you understand the interest rate. So the money demand curve. The money demand curve, like all of our demand curves, is downward sloping. And this shows what kind of I just talked about. When the interest rate is high, people are going to demand less cash. They're going to want to keep it in the bank because they can be earning interest instead. As the interest rate goes down, people will demand more money because keeping it in the bank, they're not losing out on much of anything. So there are four things that shift the money demand curve. The first is the aggregate price level. Think about it. If everything in the country starts to become more expensive, what do people need? They need more cash to buy things that are expensive. So the entire demand curve would shift to the right. And if prices go down, the demand curve is going to shift to the left. Next, changes in real GDP. An increase in real GDP is going to shift the money demand curve to the right because more people are buying goods and services at every price level. Changes in technology. With the advent of debit cards, credit cards, PayPal, Venmo, people don't need as much cash. And so when technology allows you to buy things without cash, the money demand curve is going to shift to the left. And then finally, changes in institutions. If banking regulations change, if maybe something like Bitcoin, right? If something happens that makes money more attractive to be held as cash, the demand is going to shift to the right. And if banks do something to make money more attractive in a bank, the money demand curve will shift to the left. The biggest one that we're going to think about is probably aggregate price level. That's the one that you're going to see most of the time. You also might see changes in technology. Don't forget about money demand curve. Most of what we talk about with this graph is the money supply, but money demand is important. So here we see leftward shift of the money demand curve and a rightward shift of the money demand curve, right? The same way, the labels of our graph are the nominal interest rate, okay? This just says interest rate, but I want you guys to use nominal interest rate and quantity of money. Okay, so let's look at the equilibrium interest rate. Here you see the graph. We have the nominal interest rate. We have our downward sloping demand curve. We assume that the supply of money is fixed by the Federal Reserve. It does not depend on the interest rate. The Federal Reserve, which we'll talk about in a couple weeks, determines whether or not they're going to increase or decrease the money supply. And so our money supply curve is vertical. And so that's the quantity of money set by the Fed. Where it crosses our money demand curve, this becomes our equilibrium interest rate. And that's your money market graph, okay? We will do lots of practice with this, and then keep your eye out for loanable funds. And please don't forget, ask questions.